Next, I would like to present the Leadership Awards for a Lifetime of Achievement to a true icon in life science. Dr. Pindaros Roy Vagelos has an unmatched record in building both pharmaceutical and biotechnology companies into top world-class enterprises that translate science into medicine. It is remarkable to have an active career for 6 decades, but it's truly exceptional to head the legendary Merck for a decade, take it to the new heights, retire, and subsequently spend 2 decades working with the Regeneron team to turn it into the 5th largest biotech company in the USA. His career began when he majored in chemistry at the University of Pennsylvania in 1950. I shaved 30 years in one shot. You owe me lunch. He received an MD in 1954 from Columbia University. Coincidentally, that was the year in which CME was born. His knowledge of chemistry permitted him to work in medicine, biochemistry, and drug discovery, and ultimately to lead the giant research-based pharmaceutical company and guide a biotech firm. After working at Massachusetts General Hospital, the National Institutes of Health, and Washington University School of Medicine in St. Louis, he joined Merck Research Laboratories in 1975. In 1985, he became CEO and subsequently chairman of the company until retirement in 1994. We all know how difficult it is to be on the list of Fortune's most admired companies, which since 1983 has elected 50 companies each year, taking into account not only financial health and stock performance, but innovation and corporate social responsibility, among other metrics. It is quite an achievement to make it once to the top of the list. However, to make it to the top 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 times is astonishing. No other CEO has matched this amazing feat. Not Jack Welch, not Steve Jobs, not Bill Gates or Larry Page. And Dr. Vagelos did it starting in the 1980s, an era where many businesses were thought to be on the wrong side of the law sometimes. So how do you make a company rank at the top for so many years? An effective research engine, opportunities for women and minorities, sound pricing policies, global quality control standards, good environmental and employee policies, and saving more lives than ever, even when you make no profits in those deals. Now, I said no profits. That must be giving some of the financiers in this room shivers. And yet, it is exactly the conviction and vision that set Dr. Vagelos apart. Merck donated the technology to Merck to make its vaccine against hepatitis B to the People's Republic of China, which helped over 100 million people. Next was the donation of Mectisan, the antiparasitic for river blindness, an illness that attacked or afflicted 90 million people in Africa and Latin America. You will find a detailed account of his life, his vision, and strategies in his book titled Medicine, Science, and Merck. But his Midas touch did not stop with Merck. When he became chairman of Regeneron Pharmaceuticals in 1995, company shares were priced at $3. Today they trade at $540. and Regeneron has a market cap of $58 billion. Dr. Vagelos serves as chairman of the board of advisors at Columbia University Medical Center. He's a member of a number of public policy and advisory boards, including the National Math and Science Initiative and the Nature Conservancy. He was a member of the board of PepsiCo, Prudential, TRW, Boeing, Estée Lauder, and other companies. Behind every great man, there is a great woman. And none of Roy's successes would have been possible without the love and support of an extraordinary woman, Diana Vagelos. Further, Roy and Diana's passion and support for STEM education are exemplified in programs at Columbia University, UPenn, Rutgers, Rahway High School, and others. So, ladies and gentlemen, it is my distinct honor to present the 2015 CME ACS Leadership Award for a lifetime of achievement to one of the best business leaders of all times, and a chemist at heart, Dr. Pindaros Roy Vagelos, Chairman of Regeneron Pharmaceuticals.
Thank you, George, and it's a real pleasure to be here with all of you, especially the students. And I really want to thank the ACS CME group for my selection this year, and to thank all my friends who have come to help me get through this. First, the group from Merck, with whom I was associated for 20 years, really. And I must say, what I accomplished at Merck was largely through research. So this is about STEM. STEM is essentially the background that I've lived from the time I left high school, which was, I think, 1947. I was an undergrad. My undergrad degree was in 1950. But I spent time at Merck, and I appreciate the Merck group being here, and especially Ken Frazier, whom I saw earlier. But yes, taking time to be here. And similarly, when I had to leave Merck because I was 65, and that was 21 years ago, I was saved from retirement by my friends at Regeneron, George Yankopoulos and Len Schleifer, gave me an opportunity really to continue the things I love to do, and that is to be, in this case, associated with rather than leading, which is what you do when you have to retire. And as chairman of Regeneron, which has done such great things, and Theravance, another small company with which I was associated for a number of years. These allowed me to extend some of the things that I really like to do. And I'd like to tell you, and especially the students, a couple of things that, based in science, that were accomplished in the Merck, which had time really to evolve and to mature while I was there. And so, what projects really stand out in my mind and are timely for today? First, the going to Merck was an opportunity to sort of strategize the research, their approach to drug discovery, and we decided on molecular targeting rather than whole animal, live animal studies, looking to discover chemicals that could be drugs without really having a target, understanding the target. And so when I went to Merck, we said, let's select either an enzyme, an ion channel, or a receptor, so we could understand what we were going to be aiming at with our great chemists. And we did that in one project, which we took on very early with a friend who moved with me from Washington U, and that is taking on the so-called cholesterol hypothesis. At that time, there was information that suggested that high levels of blood cholesterol could be causative in coronary heart disease and heart attacks. The evidence was numerous. On the one hand, epidemiological. If you look across the globe, those populations that have high blood cholesterol levels have very high levels of death from heart attack. For instance, Japan, which had very, very low levels of blood cholesterol, the Japanese seldom die of heart attacks. Whereas people in Finland who had an incidence of death from heart attack 14 times higher than those in Japan, had sky-high blood cholesterol levels. And if you look across the globe, there's a straight line relationship between levels of blood cholesterol and incidence of death from heart attacks. So that was one. Opening the coronary arteries, the arteries that get plugged in a heart attack, and look at what's inside, and you find they're filled with cholesterol. So those were the clues. But the ability to do the experiments that led to the discovery of the statins was based on understanding the biochemistry, how the body makes cholesterol. And that led to 2 Nobel Prizes, Theodor Lenin and Conrad Bloch, who mapped out all the enzymatic reactions between acetyl coenzyme A, 2 carbon piece, leading up to, after 20 enzymatic reactions, to a very insoluble cholesterol molecule. And what Theodor Lenin said in his Nobel lecture was that of all these reactions, there was one that was the slowest, and under control, under biological control, and he called that the pacemaker enzyme, and that was HMG-CoA reductase. And that enzyme, therefore, was an obvious target for industry to try to reduce blood cholesterol. And so many companies went at it. When we joined Merck, Merck was looking at it, sort of. But when Al Alberts got into it, and we were setting up to study to try to find a substance, a chemical, which might become a drug, that would block that one enzyme to reduce blood cholesterol, we suddenly heard that in Japan, a Professor Endo, who had moved into Senkyo laboratories, had discovered the first statin. It was called compactin. It was a chemical that was found in a soil microorganism, and it had in it this compactin, which would block the enzyme reversibly, and it lowered blood cholesterol in animals, and soon was getting ready to go into humans. So this was, while we were setting up to find something like that, we were already behind. And so we stoked up thinking, well, they may or may not succeed. And so Al went on, and before long, Merck had the first statin at Merck. It was lovastatin. And lovastatin was moving very rapidly because we knew we were behind. But with the Merck team, we were catching up fast. One day we heard that that compactin, which was now in the clinic in Japan, had been stopped. And we tried to find out why, and they wouldn't tell us. They said it was an industrial secret. But the rumor was that there were tumors in animals. And so on that basis, fearing that any potential inhibitors, blockers of that one enzyme, might also lead to tumors, and not being able to verify this rumor, we stopped all experiments, all clinical studies at Merck with lovastatin. And we waited for 2 years to be sure that lovastatin was clean in all animals and was not causing any problems. Went back into clinic and showed that lovastatin, which became Mevacor, lowered blood cholesterol and LDL cholesterol, the bad kind of cholesterol, very, very nicely and safely. In 1987, the FDA approved the first statin in the world. It lowered blood cholesterol. It was shown in patients who already had some form of coronary heart disease and had high blood cholesterol. It would lower the lower levels of cholesterol very, very nicely and safely. And that was on the market. Went on the market. Some doctors liked it. Some thought, you're lowering blood cholesterol. How do you know you're doing any good? And so Merck took forward then, we had a second statin called simvastatin. And it was a bit more potent and longer duration of action. And so we thought that let's use this one to do an outcome study, which was carried on. And this study was done in 4,400 people with coronary heart disease already and high blood cholesterol. These people were studied, double-blind studies, where half of them were put on the drug, the other half were put on a placebo, a fake. And at the end of 5.5 years, in an incident-driven experiment. At the end of 5.5 years, they broke the blind and compared those patients who were on drug versus those patients who were on placebo. And what they found was a reduction in death from any cause, mortality, 30%, people on drug, reduction in death from heart attack, 43%, and a reduction in strokes of 30%. So in one experiment, we went from hypothesis to fact. And that experiment essentially revolutionized the treatment of heart disease in the world, because this was done, of course, by an American company. And so that led to many. That was an example to the Merck Research Group that focusing on enzymes and ions and stuff like that was important, and everybody got onto it, and that led to a stream of new products, obviously, and it was a great time. But I would say that looking back, what happened then was Brown and Goldstein discovered a receptor on the liver cell, which actually accounts for the picking up the low-density lipoprotein cholesterol in the blood and sucking it into the liver and destroying it. And that the LDL receptors were key in reducing the blood cholesterol. This was found, of course, after all our experiments and discovery had been done. But it's very important in that while some patients, many patients, and I would say probably quite a lot of people in this room, take a statin because there are many generations, not everybody responded. And so there was always a search for additional ways to reduce LDL levels, because that was a proven way to reduce death from heart attack. And one of them that has come along very recently and was championed and won by the Regeneron group was to focus on another enzyme complex, a protein complex that circulates in the blood, which is called PCSK9. And this complex also has a high affinity for the LDL receptors on the liver. And when you have high levels of PCSK9, they tie up the LDL receptor and take it into the liver. And so you have very high levels of LDL because they're not pulled into the liver. And so inactivating PCSK9 turns out to be a method, something you can do with a monoclonal antibody, a method to reduce LDL cholesterol phenomenally when patients have already been maximized on a statin. They can't get low enough in their LDL, and you take then a dose of PCSK9 and drop it 50 to 60% safely. And that drug is the important contribution of the scientists at Regeneron was approved about a month ago. And so so we have a follow-on of what started at Merck, and then obviously the scientists that Regeneron carried on. Now, another event that we're just heading to right now is an event in Stockholm. You know, there are very few Nobel Prizes that go to industry people. But this year, Bill Campbell, who was a parasitologist and one of the top scientists at Merck, who will receive the Nobel Prize on Thursday. And the project that he was involved in was to discover a drug that would kill parasites. And this started in about 1975, and they came up with a drug called ivermectin that was discovered as a product of a soil microorganism. And this ivermectin was an ion, it targeted an ion channel, a glutamate-gated chloride ion channel, and inactivated this channel. So chloride in the blood would get sucked into nerves and cause toxicity and kill the parasites. And because it couldn't get in the blood-brain barrier, it was safe in mammals. And so this became a very important drug for animals. But it wasn't going to be used in humans until Bill Campbell had the idea, along with Muhammad Aziz, that this drug might actually work in a very unusual disease called river blindness. And this was a parasitic disease caused by a worm Onchocerca in sub-Saharan Africa and other parts of the world. Actually, 100 million people getting exposed to this parasite. And so Mohammed went to Africa and he studied these people who have this parasitic disease where they have microfilaria in the skin. And also the microfilaria get into the eyes and cause blindness. And he took a pinch of skin in these people who had the microfilaria and had the disease of river blindness and would count 15 or 20 tiny little embryonic worms in a pinch of skin. And then he gave one tablet of ivermectin, which we called Mectizan, to differentiate it from the animal formulation. He gave one tablet, and he came back in a month, and there were no microfilaria. Subsequent studies showed that if you came back in 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, 12 months, there were no microfilaria until the 12th month, where they started to reappear. And so it became evident at the end of one experiment that we had a drug that could eliminate river blindness, which was afflicting millions of patients, by taking one tablet once a year, safely. So this was almost a miracle thing. And so the idea was, how are we going to get it to these people who are among the poorest in the world? They lived in mud huts and were dependent on living close to the rivers in order to raise their food. But if they were close to the rivers, they would get blind. If they move away, they starve. And how could we break this chain? And so we spent, the Merck team with me, initially said, well, we'll sell it at a very low price. That made some sense, except $1 a year was too much. These people were going to, we went to their governments, they said, well, these people are going to starve anyway. Blindness is not a big deal. And so we turned to the US government, and I visited with both the Deputy Secretary of State at that time, and John Whitehead, and the Chief of Staff of President Reagan, and told him the story about being able to prevent blindness all over Africa and Latin America. And they said, this is great. This is what we will plant the American flag all over Africa. I said, yes, let's do it. But walking out of their offices with their aides, they said, Dr. Vagelos, we just don't have the money in the budget. And I said, we're talking about $20 million. They said, it's not in the budget. And so we were stuck. What to do? We heard from the French regulatory authorities that they were about to approve the drug. And we were featured in the New York Times magazine section with the picture of blind Africans on the front cover. And the gist of the story was, Merck has a magic drug. What are they going to do with it? And so that was the dilemma we had. We heard that the French were going to approve it after the weekend, and so we hurriedly got our group together and made a decision, and went out there on Monday morning, had a press conference in Washington, D.C., and announced that Merck would contribute the drug ivermectin or Mectizan free to anyone in the world for as long as it was required. That was 1987. Fast forward 25 years, several CEOs, including my friend Ken Frazier, reviewed this decision. By the 25th anniversary, which was 2012, Merck was treating free 200 million people a year. And it has treated in such wide areas that a number of countries in Latin America and some regions of Africa are now free. They no longer have to take the drug, because when you kill the parasites, you kill the microfilaria, the black flies, which pick up and transmit the parasitic disease, don't have a source, so you eradicate it. And the goal of the company, along with its partners, the World Bank, the World Health Organization, The goal of these organizations is to eradicate this disease. And it's on the basis of a company that continues to support this contribution program, now in its 28th year, something like that. So that's all on the basis, really, of STEM work. And I'm delighted that Alan Alda is here, because he's such a supporter of science education. And so it's a great pleasure, and I thank you all for being here.
Your thoughts about the students and the future?
Well, thinking about students is easy for me because I deal with so many of them. And perhaps the most important thing is to get them to understand that if we are going to make progress in medicine, which is a great majority of my life, or do something about climate change, that is not going to come from political leadership. It's going to come basically from understanding what to do, and all that understanding will come from studies in science. And so alternative sources of energy are the only way to go long term, and that's going to take 50 years of research. And so understanding science and supporting it are what the American people are going to have to do, and starting with the students.
Very good. Thank you so much. Thank you.